Now I'm hunkered down in Bunker Town again.
Welcome to the fourth episode of the podcast. This is your proprietor, Tony Ortega, coming to you from an undisclosed location deep inside the interior of the Earth's crust, otherwise known as the underground bunker. This week, we had another terrific narrative from former Scientology auditor Bruce Hines. We've had several really well-written pieces from him, and this time he took us into Scientology's secretive international headquarters, its base, and its tyrannical leader, David Miscavige. And once again, Bruce does a fantastic job taking us into the mind of a Sea Org member, working with total dedication for this totalitarian organization. Uh, hey, Bruce, thank you so much for joining me. And once again, you've given the Underground Bunker a fascinating narrative from your time in Scientology. This week, we learned a lot about the difference between int and int base and gold base. And let me tell you, that's so helpful because I've always said that the overall place is int base, and I knew that gold referred to golden era production. But you helped explain that that road that bisects the place kind of helps define that, and the stuff north of the road where David Miscavige lived was more considered int, and the part that's south of the road where the city castle was more considered gold.
Yeah, that's right. If you could drive by the place, there's a big sign that says Golden Era Productions, and I think that was sort of partly public relations thing, or the public facing. Like this base is where they make movies, and the fact that that was where all of Scientology was managed from and controlled, that was sort of hidden.
And the other thing, Bruce, of course, is it's so hierarchical, right? I mean, everything in Scientology is a pecking order, and you're aware of it all the time. You always know where you are in relation to other Scientologists, especially when you get busted. And that was reinforced even with the way the place was laid out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so most of the time you spent on the north side, or you were in base, and you only were busted down to gold for a couple of weeks, but it was so memorable, it's still vivid in your mind like 30 years later.
Yeah, there's so many, when I look back, just bizarre things that I went through in my 24 years in the Sea Org, or even before that, the 6 years when I wasn't in the Sea Org, but was still a Scientologist. But yeah, those 2 weeks, it just like was one thing after another that was like, what? And then it was just over. And there I was back on the RPF.
But I think one of the things that you've done for us in these stories, not just this one, is you've given us such a good understanding of what it was like to be in that situation and see these hierarchies and these sort of impossible things that people were asked to do. And I mean, and also what I always enjoy about talking with you and about your stories is, I mean, you're such a smart guy. I mean, you teach physics, right? I mean, I know people sometimes struggle understanding how someone can be sucked into something like this, but I mean, you're a very intelligent person, and this was something that you had dedicated your life to.
Yeah. And I still struggle with that a bit because, well, I don't know. I think I was always a little bit gullible about some things, but nonetheless, to get totally sucked in. One thing that's sort of interesting to me is that, okay, yeah, I have some intelligence. I don't think I'm the smartest guy in the world, but yes, I do research in physics and teach it and stuff. Um, but that intelligence, that ability to uh, sort of put together facts and be logical, that was one reason why I was sort of a technical expert, or considered so, while I was in, because I could look at the internal writings and the internal logic, forget how crazy it is when you look at it from the outside, and put it all together and say, well, this is what should happen, or this is what's right, or this is what's wrong. In my experience, so many of those people at the int base were really smart people. like you mentioned, Mark Headley. Obviously, he's a very capable guy. He's um, and he was in, and he totally bought it. And once we realize we don't want to be there anymore, we're out pretty quick. But that whole intelligence thing, I sort of have learned that intelligence isn't something that keeps you from falling for the mind control.
And Scientology has a way, once you make that initial decision that there's something there that is good for your life and that you think might help the world, it's designed to kind of keep pushing you into that, so that it gets harder and harder to then remember what it was like before you came up with that.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And I'll never forget Paul Haggis Going Clear talking about how the criticism, the protesters, all that only helps cement your idea, that we must be doing something right to save the world if so many people are trying to stop us.
Oh yeah, that was definitely part of the. It's a very good way to put it, but that was part of the whole indoctrination, the whole ideology, was that there are people, particularly media, governments, intelligence agencies, and obviously psychiatry and psychology, they're dedicated to Scientology failing, because the argument is that if Scientology succeeds, all those people will lose their support and livelihood. And so they have to keep Scientology down. So you expect these the criticisms and the protests and the family members who don't agree with what you're doing. It's all built into it.
So here you were, you dedicated your life to it, but you were being punished for a while, and that's when you met this Wiebke Hansen, a
Right.
woman from Germany who was also in the RPF with you, the Scientology prison program. And one thing I wanted to ask you about on that was the two of you ended up getting out at the same time and going to gold. And then you mentioned that once they kind of let her out of there, they realized they had to treat her carefully. And the reason you gave was that because Germany was actually making, the orgs that had been under her in Germany had been actually doing very well and making a lot of money. But I wanted to ask you, wasn't this also the period when Germany was cracking down on Scientology and the U.S. government got involved, and basically Germany was one big PR flap?
Yeah, yes. I think the more, I think what happened with Wiebke is a lot of what started the whole government crackdown in Germany.
Ah,
I mean, I hadn't heard about it prior to that. And then it was actually in Hamburg where Wiebke was head of the organization there, where this uh, government group was set up, and they started investigating. But I think a lot of it was because of this documentary that got made about Wiebke, and that documentary went into the practices of the RPF and what they do, and I think Jesse Prince was on it, and maybe some other people. But anyway, this my understanding is that the government crackdowns came more after all of that happened with Wiebke.
and that's the famous flyovers, right? That it was the
Exactly.
German crew that was flying over in base and was causing so much trouble then.
Yes, exactly.
That's a famous incident. The other thing that struck me from this week's piece is so you described getting out of the RPF with Vipka, and you both went to Gold, and you got a job at Cine Castle where they make all these slick films for the church, and you were asked to refurbish some old lights. They were spending lavishly on the castle, which you can see to this day there, but they were for some reason trying to save some money refurbishing some old lights, and of course, lighting is very important when you're making films. And when you were sandblasting some of these things, David Miscavige happened to walk by. And I love the way you've portrayed this now in several of your pieces, how terrorizing it could be if David Miscavige happened to walk by while you were working and took a look at what you were doing. And he actually offered some advice about you should get finer sand or something. And how terrorizing that was, because then it puts you in a quandary like, oh, I better do what he wants.
Oh yeah, it's considered an order. Um, I can't remember if he did it right then, but I know a lot of times someone would go around, and including his sort of personal secretary, who would either record the things he said or keep notes of what he said. And those things that he directed or suggested, um, they were orders, and they would be kept track of. And you could talk to anybody on the base, I bet you, and say, when you knew David Miscavige was coming into your area, or if he suddenly did, how they felt about it or what their reaction was. And I guarantee you it would be similar to mine.
Just sheer terror.
Yeah. Because
Well,
it's such a whim. You could be in serious shit in 2 seconds.
but see, the other reason why I wanted to bring that up again is that, the church today insists that David Miscavige is not the sort of day-to-day hands-on guy. They claim he's this ecclesiastical leader, like he's the pope or something of Scientology, and they want to try to counter this image of him as this terrorizing micromanager. But that's what you saw up close.
Oh, there's no question. Everything that happened on that base and at Flag and probably many other places, they were directly as a result of his micromanagement.
And do you think
You,
there's any chance that today he's not a micromanager?
I don't think there's any chance at all.
Hmm.
I've wondered what even happens at the Int base these days when he's not there. What do they do? There used to be a whole organizational structure there. The Commodore's Messenger Organization International, and that included the Watchdog Committee, and there was the executive strata, and they were all there. We were all there in this one building called Del Sol, and that was what was supposed to manage it. And RTC was just supposed to be sort of a policing thing to make sure that they're doing it right. But those organizations, I don't know if they exist at all, or if they do, they don't do much because he took over managing everything.
And you say you were at Flag too and saw him there?
Oh yeah, I mean, it was mainly. I mean, there were a couple times early on I didn't even really know who he was, like around the 1980, 81 time period. But then later, I would get sent. A lot of people in those upper orgs would get sent to Flag on a mission to try to correct something or deal with something. And sometimes he was there at the same time. And so I interacted with him there as well.
And just for the folks that aren't completely up on their Scientology lingo, when we say Flag, we're referring to the uh, spiritual Mecca, they call it, in Clearwater, Florida. Int base, Gold Base that we were talking about earlier is in California, about 90 miles east of Los Angeles. That's a secretive place that Dave lived for a long time. Flag is different because it's not just a Sea Org place and where upper level teachings is going on, but it's where public come, and there's no outer wall. I mean, if Bruce, if you and I were in Clearwater right now, we could walk right down the middle, right through Fort Harrison Avenue, right through the middle of the Flag land base. It's an odd place
Yeah, we
because
could. I
it's
guarantee you, though, some security guards would appear within
that's true.
about 3 minutes.
That's true. It's an odd place because it's so important to Scientology, but it's kind of out in the open.
Yes.
And the public come there. It's not just the Sea Org, but the wealthy publics who come to get upper level auditing are there. And David has decided apparently to switch the sort of main central location, well, at least his location, from Int Base out to Flag. In recent years, Scientology's own publications have acknowledged it. What do you think it's like for him there now, based on what you saw with him there years ago?
What it's like for the Sea Org members
What
there?
it's like for the Sea Org members, what it's like for him, what it's like for the public now that Dave is apparently located, living either on the base or close to it, and shows up on Friday night graduations.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure the Sea Org members there get terrorized. I have no doubt. You know, sometimes not in the view of the public. They have other buildings there where sort of the management type activities happen, besides the Fort Harrison Hotel. And for him, it's, gosh, I can't really make sense of it. Part of it might be that since technology is improved so much in the past 25 years, he can do anything remotely. It's
That's
like
true.
working from home, sort of. So
Right.
he can maybe just feels comfortable there. Um, for a while, he was living near Author Services in Hollywood, or he had a
Right.
place there. At least he would be there. Now he's
Mhm.
in Florida. Maybe he likes the beaches. I don't know. Um,
We did actually get a report from a pretty good source. Never got it confirmed independently, but we got a decent report from a source that he was spotted jogging on the beach in Clearwater. so,
really,
but I think it would be tough on him. At least, I mean, I don't feel sorry for him, but I think it would be a little bit tough because servers. He's got process servers looking for him, and of course the media would like to spot him. So I don't imagine he gets out much.
yeah, that's true. If he's jogging on the beach, I'm sure there are people there with an eye out for process servers, for example, or for reporters.
I mean, yeah, there must be. Again, I didn't get that confirmed. Pretty good source, and so, but I think he does live there now, and um, I think you're right. I think those Sea Org members there are probably getting terrorized on a daily basis.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure.
Another key takeaway I took from your piece this week was your astonishment at seeing Mark Yeager and Ray Midoff sent to the RPF, and this was years before they ended up in the hole, where, as far as we know, they're still to this day. But I mean, there was a time when these guys seemed like they were friends. All David Miscavige and Midoff and Yeager and all these guys, right?
Oh, definitely. Before Mark Yeager got in trouble, he would go up. He was in a building called Del Sol. At this time, he was the commanding officer of CMO Int. I'm sorry for all the acronyms. I don't get around them. And then he would actually go up to either an office or something and play video games with Miscavige. And he and Miscavige and Yeager came up through the ranks of the Commodore's Messenger Org. They were both started when they were really young, and they worked their way up, and they dealt with each other, they knew each other, and they were friends. Before he Mark Yeager actually arrived to the RPF site out at Happy Valley, there's this, I don't know how well this is known, but he was put in this area which was referred to as the swamp. Now it's this area on the north side of the property, but it's towards the west where there weren't management buildings there. There was something called the Old Gilman House, where they used to put sick people when they were in isolation. Anyway, there's an area where it was sort of a low point, and everything the rains and stuff, when they did come, would drain into this area, and it was like, it was like a bog, and Mark Yeager had to like go in and try to clean it out by himself and wade through this stuff. He was treated really, really meanly by Miscavige. It's funny, I think about it, I haven't read that online about Mark Yeager's ordeals in the swamp.
And they were playing a video game. What was this, like a console, like a Donkey Kong, or was it like a?
I don't know, because I didn't know much about video games when I heard this. I was actually when I was on the RPF, and I heard Mark Yeager talking about it, because I was with him a lot after I went back to the RPF, and he was still there. And I don't know what kind. It could have been like, well, let's see, Pong was in the 70s. I was something much. I bet you there was some sort of console, but I don't really know.
And the old Gilman house has been demolished, by the way. It's gone. But that west side, yeah, there are some interesting stories. there were also some shipping containers there.
Mm-hmm.
And Gary Moorhead told me that one or more of these shipping containers was filled from floor to ceiling with expensive liquor, like top end bottles of whiskey and stuff. And he said that it was because Hubbard at some point had some kind of a policy or something about how, Scientology, one of the things Scientology was looking forward to was for some kind of civilization collapse to happen. And then the world would be rebuilt with Scientology. And so they took that seriously, that there was going to be some kind of apocalypse. And Hubbard had said something about you need to have real goods to trade because paper money won't be worth anything. And so they had these shipping containers filled with the top end whiskeys and things for that day. Uh,
Oh, God, that's hilarious.
so a couple of things I'm looking forward to when this place goes belly up is to see that liquor get pulled out and see how much it gets auctioned for. But the other thing is what you said is those crazy daily reports where they've been following Dave around, writing down everything he says.
Yeah.
God, that's just nuts.
And there was this computer program. It was an internal computer, like we had internal emails. They couldn't go out, but we could send like an email to someone on another post. And also on that, you would get reminders of the orders that you had received and what the deadline was. That was the TM. What's the TM on this order, which stood for time machine. Uh, and these programs would track all of this. He would say you need to do this, we need to do this, need to do this. It would all get put into this program, and then this program would sort of send these orders to individual staff members and say, you have until such and such a time to get this done. And then the computer would automatically remind you. And if you didn't get it done on time, you'd get a little chit, an ethics chit, which is just a note to your ethics file. And then you could get a knowledge report, and then you could get a court of ethics. And it would get hard, the consequences of not carrying out this order would get worse and worse. It was pretty crazy.
And I remember, well, when you say that, I also think about the fact people often ask me, okay, Tony, these Sea Org workers work around the clock, 365 days a year. For years, they don't see their family. But what do they do? And when you're mentioning that about the time machine keeping up on you and everything, I still get that idea. There was just so much pressure, um, and so much terrorizing. But it's still hard to describe what exactly were you doing.
Hmm. And that
What
depended
do you say when people ask you that?
a lot of meaningless work, worrying about fake emergencies. Um, so it would depend on your post. So I had a job most of the time I was there where I was supposed to review the application of the technology, auditing and training. Technology refers, in Scientology, when you say technology, you mean auditing and training. And I would get people's auditing records. I would get videos of sessions, and I would review these, and I would find out what's wrong, and then I would send out correction orders. So I would spend, I might spend 4 hours straight going through, um, say, 5 folders that I'd gotten from Flag, from Clearwater. And they were the folders of a public person, particularly if they were a wealthy public person, who had expressed dissatisfaction or weren't totally happy with what happened. And so I'd have to dig through these things. And, each one is about 2 inches, 3 inches thick, and the whole pile might be a foot, foot and a half high, and I have to go through and look at all the records and say, oh, look at, he asked the wrong question here, or the case supervisor ordered the wrong process here, or something. So that's how a lot of my time was spent. Or I'd be looking at a person auditing And I would say, oh, his delivery of that command was not right, or he missed an instant read on the e-meter. That's what I would do. But someone who, say, worked in Cine, they would be, and like one day, when this brief time when I was in Cine, we had to attach plugs to cables. And so, you take them apart and you strip the wires and you screw in the plugs, and there were a whole bunch of these to do. But it's stuff like that. The set makers would, someone would make a whole plan and they look like blueprints. And then you start building walls out of 1x3 wood, and you put them all together, and then you put the skin on it, and it's a pretty elaborate process. But everyone's busy doing something that is supposed to be their post.
It's look, they have some talented people there. They some of these videos, I mean, what they're trying to convey is often kind of ridiculous, but the production values can be very high on some of these Scientology films.
Yeah, they do. They do know what they're doing, and they make good sets. The guys in Cine that build the sets, they also build the sets for the international events. And I don't know what they're like these days, but back in the olden days, there'd be a huge arch that would go over the stage, like 20 feet off the floor, with these big pillars that would hold it up, and there'd be all this ornate scrolls and wings and stuff that would be made, and I don't know. But anyway, they're talented. They know what they're doing, and they've had a lot of work at it.
And everything has to be okayed by Miscavige. Every step, right?
Yep. Like here's our proposed design for the next event. Oh no, that sucks. Who came up with this? Okay, that person's going to ethics. I want another proposal on my desk by tomorrow at 9 a.m. or something like that. That's the kind of thing you would get.
So the fact that whatever creative steps might have been taken, ultimately what they end up with at the IS Gala always looks like a Nuremberg rally. That's on Miscavige, right?
Yeah, exactly. 100%. A Nuremberg rally. That's funny.
I mean, I kind of miss those. We haven't had any true international events in a couple of years because of the pandemic. They did have a birthday event in Clearwater this last March, and they called it an international event, but it was restricted to people who were already at Flag. They weren't
Yeah.
flying people in. They're still not. And I don't know what's going to happen with the IAS. Did you, as a Sea Org worker at the Imp base, did you get a chance to actually attend some of these international events?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the main one that we all had to attend was the 1993 announcement that the IRS had granted tax exemptions.
The
That
war
was,
is over. The
yeah,
war is over.
that was the biggest thing ever. But there would be, like in LA, they used to have a lot of events at the Shrine, and then there couldn't get enough people to attend and it would look too empty. But yeah, we would go to that, and we would be ordered to go because we would be bodies in seats, and we wouldn't dress in our uniforms. That we would dress in like a suit and tie kind of thing, and go and sit there.
Yeah, that's an amazing one. October 1993, David Miscavige announced that the war with the IRS was over and that Scientology had basically gotten everything they wanted, tax exempt status for virtually all their organizations. No question, this was to this day is David Miscavige's biggest accomplishment for the Church
Yeah,
of Scientology. It makes it, virtually impregnable even today.
yeah. There's something I think it's kind of funny. So the production of those events, they have several cameras operating simultaneously, and they have music that goes with it, and there's actually a trailer, which is the control trailer, where you can switch from one camera to another, and that's what would go to the feed that was either being recorded. They would make videos of it, or sometimes that feed would be sent someplace for someone to watch remotely. But so whoever was in the control room, they're switching and they show the balloons or whatever, and then they show Miscavige, and then they'll show some image of L. Ron Hubbard, and then, but the key point was when Miscavige said, "The war is over," and whoever was operating the cameras switched off of him and went to something else right when he said it. And I can't remember who that was. But if you look at I looked at the video later, and it's true. You don't actually see him delivering that key line. And whoever did it, I know they got in big trouble.
They denied Cob his moment of victory. That's terrible.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, he's gotten his revenge because he makes them watch that over and over again every year
Oh
because
God.
he knows it's his biggest victory.
Yeah.
But getting back to this thing about Yeager and Midoff again, what struck me about it was, I mean, I think Mark Headley told me at one time they were like bowling every week. They were
I
like
I could believe that.
they were
I
like
don't.
buddies.
Yeah. So from 1987, that's when I arrived to the base, until 1993, the three of them all worked up in RTC. Ray Midoff was called IG Tech. Mark Yeager was IG Admin, and of course David Miscavige was COB. Marty Rathbun was IG Ethics. So those are the three main things of Scientology: there's ethics, tech, and admin. And then there was a guy who was just called the IG, Greg Wilhair. So those five guys, they were like the highest people. And from then until 1993, when the shit hit the fan about, I don't know, it was like poor tech delivery at Flag or something. Those guys were up there for those 6 years. And I'm sure they did stuff like that.
But systematically, over the years between the mid 90s and the early 2000s, Miscavige, I guess, just became so paranoid, even his closest friends he began to suspect.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's
And
some sort of weird sociopathic something or another. He couldn't trust anybody,
yeah,
or not even his own wife.
right. What kind of interactions did you have with Shelley?
Oh, I had a few. She was, she could act like a hard bitch, but she was actually pretty nice. Um, okay, here's a really weird one. Some of the stuff. So I am, this was during a time period, probably 1994, and I was in Los Angeles a lot. And most people didn't get the freedom I had, where I would go drive around Los Angeles and audit some of these high profile people. Anyway, during that time, um, there was a woman who was a staff member in OSA, and she had a brain aneurysm and she died. Like,
Oh
she came
no!
into work one day and um, with a cup of coffee and set it down and sat down in her chair and then just keeled over.
Yikes!
So it was a pretty bad aneurysm that burst in her brain. But she didn't die instantly. They took her to the hospital, and she was on life support. Her husband, oh God, what was his name? He was a well-known guy. Oh, maybe it'll come to me. He was also in OSA and a big PR guy. OSA, Office of Special Affairs. And so he basically had to decide whether to pull the plug on her. Now, I was there as her quote unquote minister. And so I'm there at the hospital, and he's there, and um, he thinks about it. And they had determined that she was totally brain dead. She could still breathe, and her heart was still beating, because of the life support. And so finally, he had to make the decision that he was going to take her off life support. And so I, as her minister, had to be there in the room while they did this. It's the most bizarre thing I've ever done. And so this doctor came in, and so he just sort of like literally pulls plugs out of the wall and he walks out. And then I'm there with this woman, and I watched her slowly, like the breathing didn't stop instantly, and like it went on for a few minutes. It was just really strange until finally, she was like pronounced officially dead. Okay, so I do that. Then the next day or so, I get contacted by Shelley, and she wants to know, like, okay, so what happened there and what was going on? And the reason is that when somebody, a Sea Org member, would die, sometimes they would publish a little memorial about them. They would write about the person and what they did, and it would come out and it would get sent around to all Sea Org members, and or particularly areas where that person had been and that knew her. And so this is a little embarrassing, but I'll say it anyway. And so I said, well, I kept in communication with her as she was leaving her body, because if you're OT, you say you can do this, and you sort of imagine that you are actually communicating with someone, but I don't think you really are. But and so I said, well, she felt very upset, like she'd let the team down and she was leaving, but she was going to be back. She was going to come and she was going to get another body and then be in the Sea Org again in her next lifetime. And so anyway, I said stuff like that to Shelley, and she was going, oh, okay, yeah, okay. And she was really nice about it. And at one point I said, like, well, I don't really know if I'm being accurate here, but this is sort of what I think. And so she sent me for correction. It's called a cramming order. She sent me to cramming. That's when you go in and you have to restudy materials that you should know. Um, it's an official order you get, and you have to go do this to the cramming officer. Anyway, and so she said she was correcting me on the fact of some of these things that have been written about how, you spirits are, they're Satan's and that you can communicate with them or something. I don't know. But anyway, that was one interaction I had. She actually called me on the phone and I told her this stuff.
So she kind of punished you for maybe being not precise with your language in regards to this.
No, for doubting that I could actually communicate with a dead person.
Oh, for expressing some doubt
Yeah, right.
about what you thought you had experienced.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. That's well, I have heard this from many other people that she could be hard as nails like anybody in the Sea Org. And some people to this day are not really complimentary about her, but many others have told me they felt she was most of the time she was a mediating force, so that Dave would come in, cause all kinds of havoc, bust people, kick asses, even slug people, and leave, and then she would be there to kind of try to calm people down, make sure they were okay, and doing what she could to kind of like lessen Dave's damage.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've saw it myself. And yeah, she was that way.
Yeah.
And she could be really, she could be really nice. There was a time that went away after a while, but early on when I was up there, they would actually celebrate Christmas, and you'd get Christmas off, and everyone would go to. I talked about this building called MCI, Masker Canyon Inn, where we had meals and stuff. There'd be a Christmas tree and presents under the tree, and that's when COB would get just obscene gifts from some of the organizations around trying to curry his favor or something. But I remember one morning I walked in and she was there, and she was as nice as could be. Oh, hi, Bruce. Merry Christmas. I hope everything's going well. That's how she had that side to her.
Right. Yeah, and didn't you have like a little bit of your pay docked for several weeks leading up to Christmas to help pay for Dave's gift?
Absolutely. We definitely did. And that was because that was the organization that, I was in CMON. CMON had to give a really good gift. They couldn't let ASI, Author Services, give a better gift than, so there was like this competition. And yes, our pay would be docked.
Jeez. Yeah, and I've heard that if he wasn't happy with the gift, oh, It was really bad after that. Because
I was
I
never
heard,
around for any of those, but
well, I heard from a Sea Org person that they had really saved up one year and had bought him this very expensive BMW or something, thinking that they were giving him the greatest gift ever. And he just thought it was a joke or something and thought it wasn't the kind of car he wanted. And it was just heads rolled, you know. Maybe that was after your time. I don't know.
well, I remember one year he got a Miata, a Mitsubishi Miata, and it looked like a cool little sports car, but I guess they weren't that good. I seem to remember hearing that he wasn't happy with that. I don't know if that's the same incident.
Could be. And I mean, you know, it's been years, you know, and people's memories, but yeah, I mean, but the important thing is that these people are making $50 a week when they get paid at all, and yet money is taken out of their pay so that Miscavige will have nice birthday and Christmas gifts.
Yeah,
Jeez, incredible.
yeah, it is just amazing. It is amazing.
And you know what I think you've written about this before, but what are some of the things that finally started to crack through for you and started to make you wonder about how you were spending your time?
Well, you know, okay, I guess the very first thing was right when I got initially busted from my position in CMO Int and sent to the RPF. So that was in 1995. And I've talked about this on uh, Nightline and stuff, um, where that was when Miscavige came in and he hit me. I know he hit other people way worse, but he did hit me, and I got in trouble. And then um, I was put at that particular time. The RPF didn't exist out at Happy Valley yet, so I was put with some other people who were also in trouble at the far west end of the property. So it was probably close to where those um, shipping containers were that Gary Moorhead was talking about. Um, and so when I'm there, I'm like, okay, this is just horrible. I want out. And I looked for ways I could escape. I was going to try to run down the road or something. And of course, you're surrounded by a barbed wire fence, and there's motion sensors on it. And I was trying to picture how I could still maybe, climb up on something and jump over to a pole. Anyway, I was just trying to figure out how I might be able to do that. So that was probably the very first time when I thought, this place is crazy. But then, interestingly, as you go through the paces of the handling, quote unquote, you're getting, you start to sort of calm down and start to toe the line again.
But
Then,
then you wrote, and then of course you wrote about the 9/11 thing that also helped.
yes, but before that, the 9/11 thing was huge. That's what put me over the edge in terms of I'm out. Um, while I was on the RPF, and it was in 1996, and I was this guy who knew a lot about the tech of Scientology and what L. Ron Hubbard had written about it. And the golden age of tech came out, and the initial bulletins, before they were actually issued to the public, they sent out to the RPF, and we were sort of like a trial group. We were supposed to use these things in our auditing, what we did on our twin when we're there at the RPF trying to get rehabilitated. And there were things in there that had come from David Miscavige and some people that he had putting this stuff together that I thought was wrong. And there were particularly some things about the e-meter, about what these certain reactions on the e-meter looked like and what you should look for. But there were also some procedural things about how you audit somebody, and I thought they were wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually would say it. And in retrospect, I think that's maybe one reason why I ended up spending a long time on the RPF, because the fact that I voiced disagreements about this stuff that showed that I was really off the rails, and they really had to keep me and work on me to get me to see right or something. But anyway, that was the earliest point. Um, when I after the 9/11 thing, and I saw how the people there to help, besides the Sea Org members I was with, all sorts, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people there at Ground Zero trying to help out.
And let me just remind our listeners, if they haven't seen that piece in a while, and they should, it's a fantastic piece. I've actually first mentioned it in a Daily Beast piece. I mentioned it about you, but then you explained it more in a piece you wrote yourself for the bunker. You were literally on the roof at the New York org helping repair the roof of something when the attacks began.
I was,
and
yeah.
and that suddenly all hell had broken loose, and you then later that day or the next day found yourself down at Ground Zero trying to help out with the first responders. Scientology was crowing about it, the fact that we're making a difference, we're helping. But your reaction was that, well, I thought one of the most interesting reactions you had was you saw that actually the people you were watching were providing real help to each other. And these were people you had been indoctrinated to believe were wogs, non Scientologists, and therefore they were no use at all.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
It
fascinating.
really, really struck me.
So tell me, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You were going to talk about that.
Yeah, and well, then I saw that, and then it did still take me a year and a half to finally believe, because
Hmm.
there's a lot to overcome to get out of there. A lot of mental blocks and barriers and things, and real physical blocks too. Um, but when I first decided, okay, I'm gone, and I you know, did my escape up to Port Authority to get on a bus and get out of there. Um, when I told myself, and I told some other people that I knew, like I had some nieces who were Scientologists, that the reason I was gone was because I thought that David Miscavige had um, altered the tech. He had squirreled. They use the word squirrel. He had squirreled the tech, and so that goes back to that experience with the golden age of tech while I was still on the RPF. It didn't take me long to progress through the idea that no, it's all bullshit. It wasn't just what David Miscavige did.
How long did that take? Because that's different for everyone. I know it can take a long time for some people.
Well, let's see. It was probably, I bet you it was 2 years.
2 years, okay.
Gradually,
Hmm.
and um, there were a couple things that really helped on that. One was, well, a big thing. When I was first out, I still would not go on the internet to read about Scientology because I still had the idea that it was all lies.
All the
It was,
criticism was lies.
yeah, it was put there by government agents or something um, to make Scientology look bad. And then, so finally, okay, I'm just going to do it. Um, by then, I had my own computer, which was a big deal. And so I, punch in Scientology in Google, and I start to read. And it's very eye-opening. And what's interesting about that sort of thing is you read about something that someone else said, and it's something that they experienced where they were, and then it would resonate with me because I had experienced something very similar where I was. One of the mental traps is that when you're in and you see something that is just weird, you think it's a very isolated thing. That, and the rest of the Scientology world was all great, but there's just this weird thing, maybe one bad guy, or maybe, um, and so you think it's limited to you. When you get on the internet and you see, no, it was everywhere. It's a big eye-opening thing. And then, anyway, there were a number of other things that progressed with me. I finally decided to Google my own name.
Oh,
Never, this was I just thought, oh, I wonder what have I put in my own name. And first of all, I see that there are really a lot of Bruce Hineses in the world that I had no idea about. But and then I Googled my name with Scientology, and then all this stuff popped up. And one of the things I saw was something that Chuck Beatty had written, and he had mentioned me. And Chuck and I were good friends on the RPF and also before the RPF. And we still are. We still are in contact. And I ended up calling him, and he told me that about several other people who had gotten on and had posted things on the RPF or had talked to media, and that there wasn't any backlash from the church. And that's one of the big fears. You think they're going to come after you if you say anything. Anyway, it wasn't long after that where I agreed to talk to a guy from the Washington Post named Richard Leiby.
Richard Leiby, one of the best.
And he was doing an article about the weird vaults with all out in New Mexico,
Right.
and I knew something about it because I'd been to the one Rim of the World, or I can't think of the name of it.
Twin
The
Peaks,
one,
you've been up there? Really?
oh yeah,
I didn't know that.
I was actually in the vault. I just went and visited for a couple days. When I went there as a technical expert to see if they were doing the auditing and training of their staff.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, so because of that, Richard Leiby talked to me, and then he did this article, and my name was in it, and Chuck Beatty's name was in it. That was the first time. And when you make that step, when I did that, I have now spoken to the media critically of Scientology. That's like the biggest suppressive act you can do. And so anyway, knew I was totally out at that point, like 100%.
And have they tried to harass you very much?
No, not. They haven't. I've wondered about that. Um, they put up a website about me and they say all these things that aren't true. But other than that, not really. And my conclusion is they just don't have the manpower anymore. They've lost so many people. They cannot muster the people to try to do something.
I agree with you. I think they tend to save what resources they have to aim at certain targets.
Yeah,
Ron Miscavige was just, absorbing so much of that for several years. And of course, Mike and Leah.
yeah,
But that's good. I'm glad they're not messing with you because you've been an invaluable source.
yeah. I'm glad too. And um, there was one thing. I've talked to my wife about this, and early on, people like when people would want to interview me because I audited Nicole Kidman,
Right.
and I had done this, and so that was, these were more people that were interested in the celebrities than about Scientology.
Always.
But I said early on, like, okay, I was an auditor, and I was told things in confidence in those sessions, and just because those people trusted me, I am not going to tell people what they told me in those sessions. And so my wife thinks like, well, they knew you weren't going to really give anything that could be damaging. I could talk about life at Int or whatever, but that wasn't really new news for anything.
So the fact that you are actually still observing the auditor's code years after you left not only speaks to your credibility, because even if it was all garbage, even if they abused you, Nicole Kidman spoke to you in confidence, and you are still honoring that.
Yeah, and it's not so much. It is, there is something about that in the auditor's code, but it's more my own personal integrity about if someone tells me something and they think I'm trusted, and I'm not going to go blab to someone else about it. I'm not going to.
Well, look, you've proven to be a man of integrity, and uh, Scientology isn't. I mean, Scientology lies about itself. It lies about us. And This is one of the reasons why I've enjoyed speaking with you, and I'm so grateful for the pieces you've written. Is we not only do you produce a incredible description of what happened there, you have such interesting insights about the mindset there. You've talked about how they just broke you down. I mean, somebody the very way of thinking inside Scientology is something they have control over.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, listen, Bruce, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I hope you keep writing for us because you've just done some absolutely terrific pieces for the bunker, and I know our readers appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be able to spend this time talking with you. And I do have these things that I plan to write about. They sort of come to me. It's therapeutic for me. It helps me to connect dots, put things together when I sit down and try to put it on paper. So there will be some things. I'm not sure exactly when, but sometime soon.
We look forward to it. All right, Bruce, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now I'm bunker down in Bunker Town again, again, again. To witness history, ride the storm, wait to see a reckoning, and the day they all come. Oh, but I'm hunkered down in Bunker Town again, again, again. I'm hunkered